I think this is slowly becoming one of the most fun things I get to do, and it's another edition of We've Got Questions, and we've got questions for Caley Shoemaker. She's the co-founder, master distiller at As Above, So Below. Caley, welcome in.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, and I'm always curious as to how folks get into this wild thing that we call the alcohol industry, and how was your journey into this wild field?
It's funny. I've been making spirits since I was 21 years old. Even though I ended up here by accident, I went to school for art history, and while I was in school, really got into craft beer. I grew up in Denver, so there was amazing selections everywhere. And a friend of mine suggested that I go to a distillery tour at a distillery called Stranahan's Colorado Whiskey, which back then was one of the very few there was kind of out and about in our country. And after going on the tour, I just fell in love. I went out and looked for a job at the beer bar next door, thinking, I can pull some taps and be sort of in proximity of this really cool spot. And one day I was working the bar, and this old cowboy came in, and I started telling him about how great the whiskey was next door, and he has to try it. It's so good. It turns out that was Jess Graber, founder of Stranahan's, and I was given tours the very next day. And here I am all these years later.
Just as simple as making a good connection and saying good things about something you enjoy. And, obviously, I'm guessing you had to enjoy what you're doing to then take the leap of faith and become part of As Above, So Below. Why go be part of the launch there and be part of it?
This project is my dream. I spent 6 years with Stranahan's whiskey, and then went to California and built the Hangar One distillery. And I had a lot of fun building a distillery, and learned so many things sort of going through that process and being a national brand ambassador. My husband's worked in craft beer since 1998, so he kept saying we should start something, we should start something, and I was like, man, I need a break. But if we did, this is what I'd want to do. And eventually we decided to take the leap. And so just started business planning and coming up with, sort of what this place would be. And it's kind of crazy. We're coming up on 2 years open.
Well, and I was going to say, how cool is it to see what has happened in that amount of time? Because while it's 2 years open, I'm sure it's a longer process than that to get to the opening. Uh, so what's it like to be celebrating those 2 years and looking back on everything?
It's pretty crazy. We're hitting our stride, it feels like, finally. And up until now, being in startup mode has been a totally different experience than anything I've ever done. I always worked for big liquor companies, and so trying to solve problems with a slightly tighter budget has been a little bit fun. But before that, all of the business planning and fundraising and construction and all that, it's been my second full time job for so long. It's kind of cool to see it really starting to take hold with the locals here, and we're looking forward to starting to move out of state a little bit as well.
And the name As Above, So Below, where does that come from?
Yeah, we like a lot of fun occult references here, and the main reason is that when you look at the history of distillation, distilling was invented by an alchemist, and so I sort of like to think of it as this crossover between art and science. And then the idea of serving spirits to people in all these different presentations and ways, it feels sort of like a ritual. And so we chose the name As Above, So Below with this fun idea that we could create this space and this spirit that people could come together over and really connect. As above, so below, we're all the same.
I love that. I love that. And when people do get to try those spirits, what can they expect? What do you guys offer?
Yeah, we lean a lot into botanicals in our spirits. I like to try to create a sense of place in what we make through ingredient selection. But I also think it's fascinating how quite a few of the herbs and botanicals and grains and things that we use to make our spirits have medicinal and cultural and magical properties. And so we like to really lean into that to sort of create this whole sensory experience. And, that's why we've really started with sort of like absinthes and gins and aperitivos and things.
And like you said, you kind of approach the distilling process a little differently, come at it a little differently. Why is that, and why is it something that you've gravitated towards?
I spent a lot of time in California with Hangar One, and I in that time spent a lot of time around winemakers, talking about terroir and sense of place and this idea that you can taste where the wine was grown. Before that, working with brewers at Stranahan's, I feel like I've seen a lot of different approaches to beverage making that aren't just, traditional sort of American whiskey, which we see a lot in our industry. And so trying to sort of take a little bit of a page from, these brewers that are going out and trying all kinds of crazy yeasts and different, approaches for fermenting their beer, and then leaning into what winemakers think about when they think about making wine that tastes like where it's from. We really want to approach our spirits that way, like choose ingredients and choose processes that speak to something a little deeper than just, making a boozy beverage.
Well, and like you said, that goes a little bit maybe to the artist in yourself, the history in it as well, and I love to see that and hear that. And what's your favorite type of spirit to make? Obviously, I know you're in the botanical realm, but kind of what's the favorite, if you can say? I mean, I know it's like children; you shouldn't say you have a favorite, but you might.
You know, Making whiskey here at my own distillery has been a very powerful experience. We're close to launching whiskey next spring. I have spent so much time making whiskey in my career that I thought that it would sort of lose its luster, and it hasn't. It's sort of like time travel, right? You can create this fantastic, white spirit and have a pretty good idea of what it's going to be like in the future, and then tasting it, it's tasting a little piece of the past when it comes out of the barrel. And so, I really enjoy making whiskey, and I love sort of that quiet, behind the scenes, sort of meditative process of maturation, and the really wide, varied flavors that come into the whiskey throughout the time that it's in the barrels. Um, you know, Absinthe and gin and botanical spirits are such a blast to me because they remind me of medicinal preparations and things. But I think whiskey is my first love, and will probably always continue to be my favorite spirit to make.
Well, and you mentioned doing both those two different things, and what people might not realize is there's a lot of difference in those. There is similarities, but there is a difference. And how different is it for you, being able to distill those, and how much work goes into it, getting one set up for versus the other.
Yeah, making gin for us is like a 1 week long process. We're macerating botanicals. We load them into the pot. We distill the botanicals through a gin basket, and as it comes off the still, we're tasting the gin. It's pretty much ready, and we're gonna cut it to proof and put it in a bottle. With whiskey, there's this grain fermentation process. We put that ferment into the still and distill it, and then it goes in a barrel for 2 to 5 years. And so, it's cool to see one come to fruition so quickly, and to just sort of be conjured out of these botanicals into this really interesting expression, and then this other one sort of like takes this time to arrive. And I think both of those things are a great experience as a distiller, and obviously consumers love them for different reasons. But the variation in process for us, I think, is fun because it gives us an opportunity to sort of get some things done quick and plan for the future at the same time.
Well, and like you said, it's a lot of fun. It shows off different skill sets and so forth. And I guess my last question for you is what other fun things do y'all have coming that you can talk about and maybe not give too much away?
Yeah, I mean, for us, whiskey's our big 2024 adventure. We just released an absinthe, and that's been a really cool experience for me because I always sort of wanted to make absinthe. It's had this mystique around it. I was like the goth kid with the clove cigarette in high school, so it was meant to be. And making the absinthe was, for me, really cool, but I thought that consumers would probably be like, what is this? You don't see a lot of absinthe out in the market. And especially here in New Mexico, where, craft spirits were just legalized in 2011. There's not a lot of craft. Like, we're sort of a new industry here. So I thought that people would sort of be like, what the heck is this? Why is it so expensive? No idea. We've almost sold out the first batch in less than a month. And I just cannot believe how excited people are for absinthe. And so it's been very empowering for me as a distiller to like just go out there and do those wild things that I think are interesting and fun to talk about. And as our whiskey starts to become ready, I'm really looking forward to like creating some unique barrel finishes and getting out there and sort of like pushing boundaries of what American single malt can be as a, sort of a new category for US whiskey.
Well, it sounds like you have some really exciting things coming.
Yeah, yeah. It's never a dull moment over here.